Coming up this morning on Hot News.
Does CBT improve anger management outcomes on the NAS in adults with mild to moderate intellectual disability compared to other interventions for anger management?
Good morning and welcome to Hot News. I'm Lindsay Olberg.
And I'm Morgan Hall. This morning we have a hot topic in occupational therapy for you. We're going to be talking about anger management for adults with intellectual disabilities.
That's right, Morgan. We have a hot lineup of occupational therapists who are eagerly waiting to speak up about this topic and share some insight into the new evidence-based practice. And now over to Katie, who's live at Dalhousie University.
Thanks, Morgan and Lindsay. This is Katie reporting live from the Dalhousie University Health Sciences campus. For individuals with intellectual disability, anger and anger management can be a challenge. When not managed effectively, anger can lead to significant societal consequences, such as exclusion, opportunity loss, and stigmatization. Cognitive behavioral therapy has become standard treatment for anger management. However, its effectiveness for individuals with intellectual disability has been understudied, and little is known about other approaches to anger management for this population. The Navico Anger Scale and Provocation Inventory is a widely used outcome measure to test the efficacy of such programs. However, little evidence exists for its use with this population. Back to you, Lindsay and Morgan, in the hot newsroom.
Thank you, Katie. You can definitely see how anger can create barriers to a functional lifestyle. It can be difficult for individuals to engage in daily tasks and be an active member of the community.
Yeah, it definitely highlights why it is so important for us as occupational therapists to keep up with the emerging research.
Speaking of that, we have Pam on location at the Halifax Health Interprofessional Conference, where she'll be sitting in on a focus group to discuss this issue.
Oh, thanks, Morgan and Lindsay. I'm Pamela Millay, and I'm here with occupational therapist Claire Damon. Thanks for meeting with me today, Claire.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We're just here in front of the conference center. What can we expect to see inside today, Claire?
Well, today I'm going to be presenting the findings from our critically appraised topic about anger management for people with intellectual disabilities to my interprofessional colleagues.
Oh, sounds interesting. Let's go.
All right. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I know that you guys are all health professionals and you work with people with intellectual disabilities. So I'd like to talk to you today about the critically appraised topic that my OT colleagues and I have formulated, and it is about anger management interventions for people with intellectual disabilities. Yes. So to start, I'll just explain. We did review 2 experimental studies, 1 case study, a systematic review to kind of incorporate a few more studies, and we also looked at the use of the outcome measure, the Navico Anger Scale as well, and we looked at the validity and reliability of this measure. So, the findings of the experimental studies on cognitive behavioral therapy both found that the participants experienced improvements in their ability to manage their anger, which is really great. The only problem is that the actual quantitative findings were statistically insignificant. In the case of the actual case study about narrative therapy as an alternative form of anger management intervention, they didn't actually end up reporting any of their quantitative results. They found them to be insignificant, and they also reported a lot of bias in their qualitative results.
Claire, I actually use cognitive behavioral therapy a lot in my own practice. I know that research is pretty limited in that area, especially for populations like this.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that systematic review and meta-analysis that you mentioned?
Definitely, that's a great question, Pam. In the systematic review, they reviewed 12 studies about cognitive behavioral therapy, and for the meta-analysis, they included 9 different studies for this population.
So there is quite a bit of research in the area.
Yes, there are quite a few papers written about this topic. However, there are a lot of methodological flaws in the research, which makes it hard to draw conclusions from it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so So all of the studies that we reviewed use the Navico Anger Scale as an outcome measure for their studies. This measure is used to measure people's perceived level of anger. However, this outcome measure has been understudied in this population.
Well, I know that we use the Navico Anger Scale quite often at the clinic I work in for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Is that something that we should be reconsidering?
Well, we can't say for sure, but what we do know is that there needs to be more research done into this outcome measure.
Claire, I'm just a little bit curious. If this outcome measure that they're using for all these studies hasn't even been really looked at for people with intellectual disabilities, could that be the reason why they're not finding statistically significant results?
That is a great speculation, Katie. My OT colleagues and I that formulated this CAT thought of the same thing. So we definitely have to be careful when interpreting the results of the studies.
I agree with you, Claire. It definitely sounds like more research needs to be done in this area. Did you and your colleagues come up with some recommendations for future research?
That's a great question, Morgan. We did think of some recommendations for future research. In all of the studies that we reviewed, none of them had a large enough sample sizes to power the studies. So we would recommend that future studies definitely try and have enough people so that we can draw stronger conclusions from this. We also would recommend that researchers need to figure out what the active ingredient of the therapy, either cognitive behavioral therapy or narrative therapy or other therapies, is for people with these intellectual disabilities. So overall, for now, we can say that because the studies have reported positive results and no harm is being done, practitioners should continue to use their clinical reasoning when recommending interventions for people with intellectual disabilities for anger management.
It sounds like you have a really well-rounded, critically appraised topic, and I can see how it applies to us all as health professionals. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Very interesting stuff, Pam. It was really good to see what the other health professionals thought about this hot topic and how the information really does apply to us all.
Now let's see how this knowledge translates into real life. Thankfully, we're fortunate enough to have permission from one of Claire's clients, Georgina, to go visit her at her group home.
Georgina has recently been referred to anger management therapy and is interested in finding out what her options are.
And now, back to Claire.
I'm here now with Claire and her client Georgina at the group home. Georgina has a mild intellectual disability and she is seeking occupational therapy services for anger management. Let's see how this therapy session unfolds.
Hi Georgina, thanks for meeting with me again today. At our last session, we had talked about your anger and how it's been causing problems in your life. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
Alright, so you were referred to anger management therapy by your caseworker, and after I did some reading, I've learned about 2 common forms of treatment to tell you about today. So in the end, the choice will be up to you, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay.
So the first one I'm going to tell you about is called narrative therapy. So this is the kind of therapy where people like you would tell your story about what makes you angry, and then you would try and change these stories so that you would feel that you have more control over your feelings of anger. So have you heard of something like this before?
Yeah, I think I tried that at my last group home and I didn't like it.
Okay, well how about I tell you about a different kind of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. So this kind of a lot of big words that just mean that you and the therapist would work together to think about why you're feeling the way that you are, and then you would think about your behaviors and try and change them so that you're not getting into trouble when you're feeling angry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, does it work?
Well, from my readings, lots of researchers are still trying to find out the best ways for people like yourself to deal with anger. And from my experience in the past, I have definitely found that my clients have found it helpful for them. So for you, I think that it might be worth a shot, but in the end, as I said, the decision is yours. So maybe you might find it helpful if we talk to your caseworker and you could make the decision together.
Yeah, I think I'd like her to come to our next meeting.
All right, so I think that's a really good idea. There are lots of different types of activities we can do with cognitive behavioral therapy, so we can discuss what might work best for you. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I think I'd like to try it.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Claire. What a great example of a therapeutic relationship.
This is all fantastic information, but what does it mean for us OTs in the field?
You know what it means.
Is it time?
It's time.
So it's that time of the day again, folks. The bottom line with Katie and Pam.
This is where we synthesize our new evidence and tell you what this means for occupational therapy.
So what does it mean? Both narrative therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy appear to have a positive impact on anger management outcomes in individuals with mild to moderate intellectual disability.
However, due to minimal available research and statistically insignificant results, as well as questionable choice of outcome measures, it's difficult to make clinical recommendations for this population with this intervention.
Although CBT is a leading approach for anger management in the general population, the lack of evidence found for this particular group suggests a need for further research to validate CBT and other forms of therapy.
So, for you clinicians out there, when seeking best practice interventions for adults with intellectual disabilities for anger management, we suggest that you use your own clinical reasoning skills as well as your available resources when you make decisions about this intervention.
And that's the bottom line.
Because we said so.
Thank you again, Halifax, for joining us for Hot News.
We'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. If it's not hot, it's not news.
And just remember, it depends. Stay classy, Halifax!
Georgina has recently
We suggest that you... That's good, so good.
Most effectively, anger can lead to significant societal consequences, such as
I've been doing some reading, and a lot of